Good morning, afternoon, evening, ladies and gentlemen. You're going to be very proud of me today. I'm going to be able to remember the name of the program we do here at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. We come here before you on allpointstv.com at 2 o'clock every Monday from 2 o'clock to 3. And every second and fourth Mondays, we are proceeding the program called Satura's Black History Corner that comes on at 3:30. It hangs around to about 4. They'll be here next week. And we are here this week and every week. And you can catch us also on allpointstv.com as you stroll through our series of programs here at the studio, and doing so at your leisure. And hope you'll watch all the programs here as people are working very hard behind the scenes to bring you a quality program throughout the day and whenever they're posting here. These programs are very much quality programs because of the time they put into it that you don't see on the scenes, but they are working behind the scenes and doing a lot of things that prepare them for what they're doing in front of the camera. I want to also give a shout out to our technician here who doesn't get a lot of credit. You hear his voice a lot on the program here off camera, but he doesn't get enough credit for the things he does here, making sure all the programs are up and running on time and that they're posted on the internet so you can watch it at your own leisure. So whenever I get a chance to plug him and give him some credit for what he does, I try to do that because I know that we sit here in these chairs and everybody think we are the ones that make it happen here. And we're just the conduits of the studio, the voice through which the studio in fact operates. But the technicians are the ones that are behind the scenes making the studio operative. So that's my shout out to those persons making this studio viable. You know, we come here, I had to think about whether or not I wear my hat today. Because I think everybody now knows what happened Saturday in the football game. And this is very serious. You know, we're looking for something special this year. And we're going to see something special before the season is over. We've already seen some things that have gone beyond what a lot of persons expected. But you saw the heartbreaking game we played last Saturday. We played against the in-state rival, and I have to hear from their fans for the rest of the rest of the season. So how do you lose a game, right? In the last 10 seconds of the game, and you're leading by 2 points. The score was 23-21, and you have 10 seconds left. And the question is, how do you lose the game given the amount of time left in the game and all of that? So I thought I'd start the program out today to talk about 10 of 10 of the worst decisions that's ever been made in history. And I'm going to do a countdown here on what I think are the 10 worst decisions made in the history of the world. And I'll start with number 10, I'll come down to number 1. Number 10, when Decca Records refused to sign the Beatles to a contract. That was a bonehead decision. You know what the Beatles did in terms of their musical careers, and they were breaking all the records, both here in the United States and also in Europe. So Decca Records didn't think they were good enough, and yet they went and smashed all the records. Number 9, and here's another bonehead decision you can't believe. 12 publishing houses rejected J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter series, starting with Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's series, and it was rejected by 12 different publishers. And this is the all-time best-selling list of books, and you've seen the movies made of it and so on, and you can't believe that would have occurred. So that's a bonehead decision. Number 3 on my list was, we're now talking about military history at this point, and that is Napoleon in 1812. This is really something here. Having amassed 600,000 soldiers, right, go into Russia waiting until June to do it, and went into Russia in 1812. And thinking that he'd be out of there within about, before the winter hit, amassed 600,000 soldiers, went into Russia, had not really ferret out the possibilities that it may last longer. And when the winter set in, by the time the war actually got started, he was down to 100,000 soldiers, and it got so bad that at the end of the trek, the Russian soldiers had to export and escort the French out of Russia. They had to export them back to France. You know, that was a bad decision, right? Number 7, you would have thought that, given the fact Napoleon had made this bonehead decision, you would have thought that in 1941, Hitler would have learned something from that. But in the same month, June of 1941, here is Hitler ordering his forces into Russia, having violated the agreement that had been signed between Germany and Russia in 1939, the non-aggression agreement between the two of them, with Hitler having a jaundiced eye on breaking it whenever it was convenient for him to do so, and showing he was no military genius, opened up a war on two fronts, both to his western rear and then going into the east, and had amassed 1.5 million soldiers on the borders of Russia, went into Russia, and within 1 week's time thought that they were going to be able to make the Russians yield as they pull within. You know how big Russia is, how they pull within Russia. Germany, I think, is winning because it was able to kill 150,000 persons in the first week. But what they had not counted on was the, first of all, retraction within the Russian state, with all the real estate that retract within that, concede Moscow at the very beginning point, but back up and then bring them into the country, and then let the winter take its course, as it happened in 1812 with Napoleon. You know, Hitler being a dunderhead as far as a military, he was not a military genius, and drawing them into the country. Then they created the offensive when they got them in the country, and of course the winter set in, didn't have sufficient clothing and blankets and those kind of things for the winter. And then they met their Waterloo, and that's a turning point, quite frankly, in World War II, not the Dunkirk rescue that occurred there to bring the American soldiers and other soldiers out of France by water, in one of the great rescues of history, in terms of going by water, rescuing them by boat, and getting them out of harm's way during World War II. But really the turning point was this thing that happened in Russia. So that was, I had that as number 7. This is one of the ridiculous decisions made. In number 6, I put down there those in the Trojan War. I mean, I can't believe, and I think that, you know, Virgil and the Aeneid and the writer of the Iliad and the Odyssey, in those two volumes, where you have the Trojan War discussed, I think that in the Trojan War that's chronicled, where you have the Trojan, you've heard of the Trojan horse. And in the Greeks, you know, fighting in this war, they were not able to get the gates open, and that's, so what they did was to construct another way of winning the war, since they could not penetrate the gates. I mean, the barbarians were at the gates, and barbarians were behind the gates. And what they decided to do was make this large horse, golden horse, and they hid about 24 soldiers inside this large, you know, thing that they constructed, and then appeared to leave the battlefield, leaving as a gift to the idea that the Greeks had been bettered by their foes. They were not able to do the conquest they had intended to make there, and they decided to leave, but to leave them a gift to show them that they wanted to give them credit for their valor. And when the Greeks appeared to leave, what they did was to open the gates up and bring the Trojan horse inside the gates. And then that nightfall, the 24 soldiers exited the Trojan horse, opened the gates to the returning Greeks outside, and opened the gates up, and that's how the conquest was finally executed. And so that's number 6 on the bonehead list. Another one, I put down this one for number 5. I think this was really a bonehead decision. We had a trek in the United States going west, and there was a tried and proven trail that you would follow. You saw it on TV in the wagon train. You know, the wagon train was always going down the same trail. I don't care what week it was. Ward Bond was going to go down the same trail, each time. They had the wagons going from the east to the west. If you had a cattle herd going, you would go take it that way. So the cattle trail was a known trail to take. But the Dunda Party decided they were going to take a shortcut. And in 1866, they're going to take a shortcut across the Sierra Mountains. And they're going to be able to do that by going through the mountains and cutting the distance and going a route that nobody ever gone before. Got up there and lost their route. The winter set in, and the Dunda Party making this bonehead decision, cataclysmic in all of its ramifications. And that part was wiped out. You've read about the Dunda Party in terms of our reading about that aspect in terms of taking a shortcut in American history. Shortcuts are always a bad idea. Number 5, and we can all testify to this one because when we saw it, we saw the contest, right, between, which one tastes best. Is it Coke or is it Pepsi? And when I was coming up, Coca-Cola, it was a big thing for you to put that straw in the Coca-Cola bottle, and you have one straw and your girlfriend a straw, and you sit out the same Coke bottle. It only had about six ounces of pop in it, but it was the idea. Coke was a stronger cola, so it didn't take a lot, and then they put some other stuff in there we're not going to talk about on the air. So you were able to get a little bit of a buzz with it. But then Pepsi came along, and they made their pop a little bit more syrupy and the sugary kind of taste, and that began to pull a lot of the market share away from Coca-Cola. And so they decided, in their ingenious scheming of things, that they had to make another Coke. And so to make it commensurate with this more syrupy taste, and when they did that, thinking they're going to regain their market share, they heard from everybody under the sun about them having changed the formula. So having having the customers and consumers taking it and giving it what for, they had to then retract and say, well, we're going to keep this Coke on the market, but we're going to also maintain what they call classic Coke. And then over the long run, you saw what happened where they eliminated the syrupy substitute and got that off the market, and then they took the classic off Coke, went back to the old formula, and that's what you have right now on the market. It was a disaster for the company, and I thought that was like bonehead number 4, this prohibition of regular Coke and going to the syrupy Coke, which didn't work. I mean, let Pepsi have its share, and Coke, you have your share. You all are sharing it from different bases of support. The consumers have endorsed both. And Coke did retain. It didn't go anywhere, but it might have gone out of business if it continued that particular down that particular path. Okay, I put down there number 3. J.C. Penney's. I think this was a bad decision. This is my own view now. This is my own list. I don't think anybody will go along with it outside the studio. And I may have to twist some arms here at the studio to get them to go along with it. But in number 3, I put down the J.C. Penney's decision. You know, you have to think, you have to understand consumers. And I think that the Koch brothers understand it. And I, listened to him last week on the Kelly Files. This is a very smart man. Anybody can turn $23 million of inheritance into a $115 billion operation. Has got to be pretty smart. You know, their father, I think his name was Paul Koch, K-O-C-H, told Charles Koch, his son, that if he didn't come back to run the business, the dad was going to have to sell the business because he didn't think the other brothers could actually run it. And if Charles Koch did not come and run it, then he would in fact have to sell the business, which is valued at $23 million. And that was the decision that Charles and his brothers made to come and run the company. But they were left the letter at the father's death. They left a letter saying, if this company stands stagnant, then consider yourself to be a failure, because you're not to be relying upon that which has already been accomplished, but to carry the company further. And he did, in fact, do that by the brothers, pretty much Charles Koch, having done this, taking a $23 million company. Now that company is valued at $115 million. And if you notice, everybody's targeting it from the left because the Koch brothers are pretty much supporting conservative causes, because they believe, not that they believe the Republicans are doing anything that's all that great, but they believe the Republicans are going toward a cliff at a slower pace, where the progressives, which is what the Democrats are right now, is a progressive party that has not changed its name, that they're taking the country, the Democratic Party is taking the country down the path to the cliff at 100 miles an hour, and the Republicans are carrying it toward the same cliff at 70 miles an hour. So they're out there financing, the more conservative streams in the political order, not because they're doing anything all that great and nothing that's really moving and shaking the trees, so to speak, but they're doing the injury at a slower level. So everybody's targeting them from the left because they understand that what they're doing with their war chest. Very smart people. I was listening to Charles Koch last week on the Kelly Files, and I'll tell you, this is a very smart man, very calm and very deliberative. And I especially liked his statement that he does not believe any politician is going to be able to change the trajectory of the country, which is exactly my assessment. The politicians don't know what they're doing. And for somebody to say that on national air and have the kind of status that they have took a lot of courage on his part. Anyway, that status is one we need to look at. But in J.C. Penney's case, when this person by the name, let me see if I have his name written down. Yeah, Ron Johnson became the CEO of J.C. Penney's in 2012. And the idea of the CEO, when he come in fresh, is to take the company and do a lot of what the Koch brothers did. Take the company at a certain point, and then you build a status of the company, make it a much greater empire, to which you get how many hundreds of millions of dollars by you, in fact, growing the wealth of the company. If you can do that, you can, reap a tremendous amount of the benefits. So he took J.C. Penney's, didn't understand why J.C. Penney stood out as one of the marquee companies in the country, but decided to change the way business was, in fact, being done. Now, you know what J.C. Penney was doing? If you want to sell a shirt for $20, if you want to sell a shirt for $10, what you do is you market it at $20, and you then make the consumers believe they're getting the bargain by you marketing it down at $10. But what Ron Johnson thought he would do is come in and be a little bit more honest with the consumers, as if the consumers want honesty in the network. Because the consumer want you to be honest with them. Let's be real here. Let's keep it real. So he's decided that if we're going to actually want to sell a shirt at $12, then let's just put $12 on the ticket. And what do you think happened when he did that? people stopped buying those shirts because they don't want that junk. Anybody selling a shirt for $12, that shirt is not worth anything, and they left it on the shelf. Nobody was buying it. You know, people want to be lied to. I mean, consumers don't want the truth. I go into stores a lot of times with, and I'm in there shopping, and they'll have up there, this box is this big. Now most of it's, the air. They got the box same size, and then they put up there 1/3 free. Okay, so how many of you think you can go in the store and you pull out the 1/3 at the top and pour it and take that out and walk out the store with it? I mean, that's the free part, right? You walk out that store, you going to jail. I mean, there's nothing free in that box. I mean, and I don't know if they're going to be able to sell those potato chips I saw in that bag last week. That bag has been reduced down to the size of the potato chips. There's 10.5 ounces of potato chips in the bag. But what they've done is they reduced the bag size down to 10.5 ounces rather than this big bag they had where it's a lot of bag with a lot of the air starting and the potato chips start at the middle of the bag. And you think you're getting a lot more potato chips for the buck, and you're fooling the consumers. And they love that because they want to be fooled into believing that they're buying this volume while the volume has gone down. I mean, I had to tell one of my friends that the tuna in those cans has been reduced. It was used to be 6 1/4 ounces, but it's now 5 ounces. The same amount of round, but the round has been condensed, and so now the tuna used to be 6 1/4 ounces, now 5 ounces, and so they go there and they buy the can at a higher price, and the quantity's been reduced. And that's fine, as long as they don't realize that the quantity has been, the quantity has gone down. And they're being duped. But who cares about being duped as long as you can kind of, make them feel like, well, you're getting the big bang for the buck. What are you complaining about? And you can complain. One person was complaining about being sold a house and it was $1 million, and the person said to the person, well, what do you expect for $1 million? And the person laughed and said, that's right, and then he had the check over. I mean, I expect a lot for $1 million, but in J.C. Penney's case, coming back to Johnson thought he'd be honest with the consumers. He's going to actually have a $12 shirt selling for $12, and everybody thought that shirt had to be cheap, selling for that price. So if you notice what they do, they mark it up and they take the price down. You get a sale on it. I know one store. I'm not going to call a name out. I know one store is a furniture store. It has sales all the time. But you know what? In that store, nothing is on sale in that store. That store has not reduced those prices. They want to sell that particular item at the price in which it is in fact stated for, and they claim that it was at this price and reduced it down to that price. People rush in there to buy the first thinking it's a sale. So J.C. Penney's had made a bonehead decision. That was really a stupid decision. I put that down as number 3. Johnson came in, he couldn't sell anything. And you go back to that old school where you're actually making people believe they're getting a bargain. Let me just tell you something. Nobody puts anything on sale where the seller is going to be operating at a loss, because if you're doing that, you're out of business. But Johnson thought he could actually come in there and be honest with the buyer. Let the buyer beware. Was that caveat emptor? Let the buyer beware, because otherwise the buyer is going to be duped, because the seller is selling in his interest and not in the interest of the consumer. The consumer's interest is to understand the seller's part, and to know that the seller cannot induce buying through coercion, and therefore there's a negotiation that goes on. Now, what I noticed when I was traveling, by the way, on this point, was when I was traveling, the negotiation goes on in the marketplace as a direct way in which business is counted in the other parts of the world. I mean, not necessarily in Europe, but in the third world, everything is bartered. So you barter back and forth because they don't have any coercive power to make you buy the product. So you actually are at the counter and you're bartering the price. The way it happens here is that bartering goes on in terms of you going in, spying out the price, and deciding whether you're going to pay it or not. And if you don't and leave it on the shelf, the seller comes back with another price the following week. And he's actually asking the question, well, how you like me now? Are you willing to buy it at this price? And if not, you come back with another price the following week. You see, it goes on in the marketplace in a different way. But if you understand that there's no coercion involved in it and what they're doing, then the buyer beware, and you work in your interest because you're very much aware of the communitarian interest at the table. And there's interest on this side, and there's interest on the other side. And I give the capitalists credit for doing what they do. They're producing with the idea of making a profit, as they should, because you have to have a profit. Somebody call Bernie Sanders up. You have to make a profit in order to go forward with your business. If you make a profit, you're out of business. And so the idea is make a profit. The question is, how much profit can you make and stay in business? Well, you try to make it the maximum profit, but you also can bring it down some so that you're still managing to stay in business, and you can actually reduce the price. And you can reduce the amount of the profit, which means you got to make some decisions within the workforce so as to be able to accommodate the fact that the profit is not quite as large. I don't think any of these politicians understand that. But, that's off a little bit of what I'm talking about here. But I just want to make these side points as well to say that this is not understood by politicians. These crazy people who do not understand that you cannot lock in a certain rate in which you pay employees, because if you do that, what happens is that by you locking the rate in, you cannot make the adjustments, and therefore layoffs are certain when the business goes down. But I can go and tell you, reading this book by, the writer of this book, this wonderful writer, Amity, A-M-I-T-Y, Shales, S-H-A-L-E-S, who wrote a wonderful book called The Forgotten Man. And if you get a chance to read this book, I guarantee you're going to understand economics a lot better than anything you're reading in these classrooms, all you university students. And anyone else, some of you economists, Paul Krugman, you can go and read this book and learn something. But that book is very, very instructive. And one of the points it makes in that book, I think in chapter 2 of that book, is that there was no unemployment in 1923. I mean, 1%, 2% unemployment. There was almost no unemployment, because what they were doing when the business would go down, in terms of the downturn, in terms of the consumers deciding that I can't hear that. I'm not going for that. I'm not buying that price. I'm not going to pay this. I'm not going to buy that merchandise. And when they decided that, the bidders had to make an adjustment in that. And they were to do it because the rate wasn't regulated by these bureaucrats. They could without laying anybody off, they could take the price of the labor down so as to accommodate the fact that nobody's buying, nobody's laid off, everybody's making something, the unemployment rate is down, and everybody's been able to achieve something in the downturn, and the economy was still booming. This was under the Calvin Coolidge, one of our great presidents in the country administration. But anybody give him credit for that? No. But this assumption that you make, that you can in fact make these determinations without understanding how the market operates, is nonsense. And this is what Johnson made a mistake in. Understand the market and who's in the market and and how they look at their fiduciary interests. And you make your adjustments based upon that. I'm going to be the CEO one day of one of these companies, but not in time in the next 10 years. I'm going to be about 80 when I when I reach my destination. I put that down as number 3. And number 2, I put down Monday Night Football because I want to come to my number 1 and my number 2 category based upon this one. Because the number 1 and 2, I got the same one in the first and second position. But in number And number two, I have NBC and ABC, which turned down Monday Night Football. They didn't think that they wanted to interrupt Doris Day on one of the stations and laugh in on the other, that it was a ratings bonanza on the two networks. They were not sure about what would happen with Monday Night Football. And so ABC didn't have a market program during that time slot, and so they went with that on ABC in 1970, and they brought about Monday Night Football in that year. You know, football was pretty much, geared toward Friday. You had high school football and the colleges, and the U of M quote unquote of football, which was the NFL, did not want to interfere with that because they have these feeder programs. The high school program feeds into the college program feeds into the NFL program. So you don't want to interfere with that because you have to have a grounding point that you can have each level being appreciated into the next level. So they didn't want to interfere with that. So Friday night was like football, varsity football in high schools. Colleges would play on Saturday, and Sunday you'd have football in the major league, so to speak. So what is Monday football about? Well, they went to NBC and they said no, and they went to CBS and they said no because they had these programs, Doris Day, and they had Laugh In, and they didn't want to interfere with that. This was bringing revenue in, and they said no to it. But ABC did not have such a winner in that time slot, and they said maybe it'd be a good idea. And then Roone Arledge did some things there with his genius, and that is put more cameras around the football field. Some that pick up the cheerleaders, and it was a hit. Monday Night Football at 9 o'clock, and you bring these voices in. You bring in, Howard Cosell, who really did not get the props I think he should have gotten. He was a great commentator. They can say what they want to about it. The guy could talk 30 minutes right off the cuff on the event that just took place in front of the viewers, and he's actually narrating and going on and on and on. And people talk about they turned the sound down when Howard Cosell was narrating. You know, Howard Cosell was a great commentator in multiple sports, and his voice, along with some other voices, made that network. And I don't know if you all noticed this or not, but they slipped in there that Southern thing that was going on at this time, as they were doing things like the Beverly Hillbillies and doing things like Andy Griffith. These programs that kind of reminded us of when we were more of a rural society, to kind of get us away from all the headaches we were getting in the urban cities and the headaches that was bringing to the table, and they were returning us back to the thrilling days of yesteryear. And they brought these Southern voices on there and had them coming through, and it just was a phenomenon. And now we still have it as the longest running program on television today, and that started in 1970, and we're now in 2015, and it's still going strong right now, taken over by another network, but it's still a phenomenon in Monday night. And ABC saw into it what was not seen by NBC and CBS, and of course the instant replays and things like that, and multiple cameras being able to shoot from different angles. That's Roone Arledge's baby, and that became a phenomenon. And so that was a bonehead decision made on the part of NBC, and also on the part of ABC. ABC got sacked by not doing that. But everybody's failed to understand the times, and those who make the wrong decisions, it makes a benefit for the other persons. And that's the way the market should operate. Nobody should come in and then order the other networks to rescind their verdict. They lost out because of the decision that they made, and that's a marketplace decision. That's where it should operate. So that's my number 2. Now, number one, I got 2 in that position, which is the worst decision. I'm speaking from a partisan standpoint. The number one, the worst decision made in history, trumping all the other decisions that were made, in my humble opinion, by the way, was what happened on the football field, home game, played with the rival team in the state of Michigan, where the University of Michigan, which is the University of Michigan, the football field that has buildings attached to it, that's the university. And we played Michigan State, which is the football team with buildings attached to it in Lansing. Now, our buildings attached to our football field are in Ann Arbor. And, of course, the 2 sister campuses in Dearborn and in Flint. But it's in Ann Arbor that this game was played, and so therefore that's where most of the tears were shed. We had 107,000 people at that game, packed in to see this big rivalry. And you know, U of M was actually, although they were number 12, they were favored in this game. And although Michigan State was number 7 on the list, here was U of M favored by a touchdown in the game, and they led all game. And we have come down to the wire with 1 minute and 46 seconds left. U of M takes over the ball, and State doesn't have any timeouts. We have 3 timeouts left on the other side. So, in the 2 biggest bonehead decisions ever made in the history of the planet, that's Moss's view, we had 2 decisions that are incomprehensible that trump all the decisions made in terms of from 10 to number 9, starting with the Beatles being turned down by Decca Records, all those I just went through a minute ago, all those decisions trumped by the one that was made in Ann Arbor this past weekend, in my humble opinion. And that was a decision made, and really you have to talk about 2 decisions that were made. Now, we got 10 seconds left in the game. Now, how many of you remember during the George Zimmerman trial when Omari, I think his name was, set a clock up on the desk, and he set it for 4 minutes, and then he sat down. I want to show you how long 4 minutes was, because he's going to make the case that Trayvon Martin had a chance to go home, and he did not go home. He's going to show how long a time that was. He had the clock on the desk, and just let the clock tick to show the jurors that this guy could have gone home, but did not do that. Came back and broke George Zimmerman's nose. He wanted to show how much time that was, and just let the clock expire. So let's just do a countdown to do a similar thing here, to assimilate 10 seconds. Can we do that together? 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Time is over. How much time is that? Okay, so bonehead number 2 in the number 1. You see, number 1 got 2 different bonehead decisions were made. Bonehead decision number 2 is, why are you kicking the ball? Hargrove has called 3 timeouts in the last 1 minute and 46 seconds of the game. Now, Michigan State doesn't have any timeouts. Can we all agree upon this without anybody getting mad? If the other team doesn't have any timeouts, you do not call timeouts yourself. Can we all get on that page? You just don't do that. I mean, is this chemistry? Are we talking about rocket science here? So Hargrove decides that he's going to call timeout, 3 timeouts in the last part of the game. None of them would tell the kicker that if anything happens and so on and so forth, you know, what to do in case of a failed attempt. because 10 seconds is like what we just counted off a few seconds ago. I mean, it's not like 10 minutes. We don't have 5 minutes, 10 minutes in the game. We got 10 seconds in the game. So can we all agree that kicking the ball doesn't make any sense? Because if you, in fact, hike the ball, the game is over. Just kneel down and the game is over. Of course, you can walk. You could have run to the sideline at least one time and try running up the gut of and that takes some time over. They run up the gut 3 times. Then the 4th time, they're going to kick the ball away with 10 seconds left in the game. So that's a bonehead decision. How much sense does that make? Yeah, 10 seconds. Just call a play and then kneel down and the game is over. But then there's the kicker's part. And they're up here threatening the kicker and threatening the guy's life, and the AD had to come out and try to calm things down because this is very, very serious when you got these universities that are connected to the football field and to the basketball court. Don't forget that. Because after football season is over, then the schools become connected to the ankle bone, connected to the leg bone connected to the thigh bone connected to the hip bone connected to the backbone. I learned that in church. And they say bones can multiply, right? Well, the football, the buildings, the science building in particular, because this is how you pay for the science building, the buildings are attached to the football field and to the basketball court. And so this is very serious stuff when you have a game like that. I mean, the whole school depends upon that. So it's serious when they lose a game, particularly like that. And now threatening the guy's life and things of that sort. Well, he should have caught the ball. But with 11 guys on the line, all of them coming at you, and you one of those kickers that walk over to the side and they kick the ball in a soccer style kick. That's a problem when 11 guys are coming because you can't block everybody because 2 guys standing in the back. And then you back there, there's 8 guys in line, 11 guys on the other side coming at you, and that's a problem. They're coming at you like a train wreck because they don't block that punch, that punt, that game is over. And so they're coming. This guy panicked, took his eye off the ball, watched the rushers coming in there, took his eye off the ball, and then fumbled the ball. Well, if you fumble the ball, you don't have all the time. 10 seconds to go in the game, what do? Well, let me say this. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure this one out. You fall on the ball, and guess what? The game is over. But no, he tries to kick the ball and kicks it right into the arms of the on-rushing defenders. And they catch the ball in midstream, and a caravan of blockers go down the side, their left sideline and score a touchdown with no time remaining. And these 2 boneheaded decisions, which are a compilation of bad decisions. So therefore, they take number 1 spot because there's 2 bad decisions in the same play. The rest of them were just bonehead decisions made at a particular point in time that played out badly later on based upon 1 decision made. But here, there are double decisions being made here that are bad. And that's why they take the number one spot here. And that is unconscionable. I haven't gotten over it yet. I'm still in recovery. And when I leave the studio, I'm going out to dinner because I couldn't even watch any more football the rest of the day.
Yeah, last time I taught your wife you're a canatotic state. You're just staring, son. I can't believe it.
John, I was in recovery for the next day and a half. I mean, they spoiled my weekend. I had a bad Sunday too. Saturday night was bad. I didn't watch any more television the rest of the weekend. That was really bad for me. And I'm still in recovery, but I think Tuesday I'll probably back to full throttle on Tuesday. But that was bad. And I know I feel your pain. Those, I was saying on my Facebook post that I could not figure out, why people drink. I don't drink. A lot of people when I go out and they're drinking, I'm having, Pepsi and I don't want to call it. They're not advertising, so I have some soft drinks, and I'm not going to be drinking around these crazy people, and they're not really in their right mind when they're sober, and when they're inebriated, there's really some problems there can happen potentially there. So I got to remain sober so I can see what they're doing. Plus, it's not in the bar. It's like some of these places that serve food, and they got alcohol as a side piece, and so I'm ordering soft drinks. And I shouldn't really be drinking that. But, I said after that game was over, I said, I can see now why people drink. Because after the game was over, if I was a drinker, I think I would have probably gotten plastered after that one, because that was just so, you're leading the whole game and 10 seconds left in the game. How do you accommodate yourself to accept that outcome? And I have to be honest with you, folks, that was the hardest thing. Was that the hardest thing? That was hard. Maybe the hardest thing. I've had some other hardships. I had some other hardships too, but that was one of the hardest things. Some of the other hard things, listen to these professors in some of these seminars. That's been hard. But my goodness, that was a downer. But Tuesday, I think probably after taking myself out to dinner this afternoon and going out and having me a nice meal and not having to cook anything myself, I think I'll be able to get past it. And by Tuesday, I think I'll be in full recovery. If not, I'll let you know next week how they came out. Let me tell you about as we close out here the last few minutes of this program, let me tell you about what I posted today, because I wanted to tell you about this in line with what we talked about last week. And I did tell you that I was going to try to finish that up in this week's discussion. I think I have enough time to do that. What I did in my post today is something that, quite frankly, is one of the posts that I'm most proud of, because I have written some posts in the past, but I wrote this post because there was something that came to me that I just now uncovered in my own thinking as I clarified some things that were really kind of askance in my own thought process about history and how to read it. And I had been missing something that was very vital to understanding history. I did not really understand, for example, how you say history is written by the victors. The victors write history. That of course I knew that was not true. Both victors and victims write history. It's just that victors are the ones that are able to dismiss the history written by those that are victims. So it's their history that's appreciated, and they shout the history that's not appreciated down, or they do it through the antidote, which is to in fact shout it down through silence, which is an antidote to shouting it down by it being shouted down in a more quiet form, where it's actually just simply dismissed and overlooked. So it's a quieter way of shouting it down by just simply ignoring it. Well, we all understand that. But what I didn't understand, and what really, as I began to read over some things and put some things together, what really came to my attention is I was clarifying this in my own mind about what was going on as I was reading about how this interface with other things were going on. It began to dawn upon me was that what people do with history, I mean, we know it, they sat on some parts of it, and then they introduce other parts that want to be more vocal and more visible. We all know that they increase and ascend some aspects of history, and they downsend some of the other aspects of history in order to make some use of it in terms of it playing out and playing into an agenda that's now in the present. So history is made to accommodate some things that are the agenda that's in place at the present point in time. And a lot of people believe, by the way, that this is a conspiracy. I have to tell you something. I don't buy it into conspiracy. You know why? Because I don't think they're smart enough to be able to plan back in that time period and have it as a continuum in the present. That's not what's going on. And what I began to understand here is that there was a foundation laid for what occurred later on in this narrative that went on in 1944. I'm going to tell you about. But the foundation was laid in 1913. But it was not laid with the idea that down the road it would be what happened in 1944. But 1913 laid a foundation for it in terms of what did in fact play out. And here's why I'm writing this 4-part series on Facebook, where I'm saying that the politicians in Washington are the most dangerous politicians on the planet. I didn't say the most corrupt politicians on the planet, because they're not the most corrupt politicians. There's some others that take their place. I can name 2 nations in particular that head that off, but they're in the ballpark, but they're not the most corrupt. but they're the most politically dangerous because they have the most power on the planet. And that goes back to 1944. There's a conference that's held in 1944, which a lot of people, a lot of writers, a lot of conspiratorialists have claimed that this shows you the conspiratorial aspect, because out of it comes the IMF, the CFR, and things of that sort. But they fail to understand why the conference is in fact called. That conference that was called in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire in 1944, it was either was it June or July? It was in July the 1st to July the 22nd, 1944. It was held at the Mount Washington Hotel in Bretton Woods. And they called this conference had 730 delegates from all 44 of the Allied nations fighting in World War II. And they're meeting there to construct what they're going to do in the aftermath of this war. Now that this war is winding down, and they see the war now having an ending point, they have to now plan for the aftermath of this war and what they're going to do here when this war comes to a close. And they're meeting to ferret that out. Now, the conspiratorialists would say they're meeting there in a conspiratorial arrangement to organize the world around some conspiracy that's in place. But that's not what they're doing. What they are doing is they are trying, these 44 nations are coming together to survive the fact that they have the economies in a state of collapse. And the politicians are trying to find some way to save their hides, because all wars are financed by fiat currency. All wars. There's never been a war that's been financed by the treasury that's in place at that point in time. You know why? Because people would not go for war if they have to pay for it by tightening their belts. So they pay for wars through inflation. All wars are fought that way. But because America is not involved in World War II until for all practical purposes, America is not involved in World War II in a direct way until 1942. Although I know you're going to tell me about the fact that that Pearl Harbor was bombed on December 7, 1941, and you're right about that. But the U.S. is not engine up its war apparatus to the point of being able to get involved in the war, getting its military in place and be able to send it overseas until the following year.
What about the American Volunteer Group out of China? Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do remember that.
That was very secretly done.
Secretly done. We had a lot of, and we had Lend-Lease and things like that too. That was part of the fact that we were in what you would call an formalized version of it. But I'm talking about a full frontal involvement in the war, where you're sending, millions of folks overseas to fight in the war, and also to clean up after what had happened, based upon the fact the war started September the 1st, 1939, when Hitler made the cataclysmic mistake after having annexed the Sudetenland in Czechoslovakia in 1936 and 37, and going into other parts of Europe. That's fine, but went into the breadbasket, Poland, that's when they had to fight, because we controlled the breadbasket. You could starve the rest of Europe into submission, and they could not allow that. They have to now fight, because Poland was the breadbasket of Europe, where the wheat was being grown in the European theater. And when they saw him doing that, they knew what that was about, and that's why they had to come to the rescue after having sold the other lesser countries down the drain. They could not afford to do that in this case, because Hitler had backed them up into a room. They were no longer able to operate through a theater of Europe with the Sudetenland being sacrificed. Now they had to come out of that room and began to throw everything they had at Hitler. Somebody ought to understand this. But the U.S. is not involved in that war, except what John is saying, and also what I'm saying here about the fact we are doing some Lend-Lease things underneath the cover, because America's not going to buy this war. We wanted, we were still in the isolationist idea, and Roosevelt could not have sold that. In fact, he only sold it by, looping the Japanese into attacking Pearl Harbor. I mean, read John Toland's book. And by attacking Pearl Harbor, by the fact of doing what? Blockading over in the South Pacific and blockading the oil so that the thing needed to prosecute the war in the part of Japan. That blockade is an act of war. But who knows about that? And they take the bait and they come in with those planes and they bomb Pearl Harbor, December the 7th, 1941. And then what does Roosevelt do? The last time it's been done, by the way. The last time a president went before the Congress and asked for a declaration of war was this war, because he knew he was going to get it. Because who's going to be able to vote no when they've attacked America? And we don't understand that there was some provocations going on, as we'll see later on with the Gulf of Tonkin and things of that sort. Well, nobody knows about the provocation. But the point is that you can go before Congress knowing you're going to get it, because you're supposed to go before Congress whenever you commit anybody in war. Look at Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11 of the Constitution. So Roosevelt goes before the Congress, and it says it's a day to live in infamy. And of course, the U.S. on December the 8th, there's a declaration of war the next day, and Roosevelt knew he was going to get it. Nobody could say no to it, because how do you say no to it with them having attacked Pearl Harbor over there in the South Pacific? They had to say yes to it. And Roosevelt was smart to be able to did not go on his own, didn't have to, and went there and did that. Well, now all these countries are fighting in World War II. They are allies at that time. 44 nations are allied nations. But they're paying for this war through fiat currency and so on and so forth. And by the fact that we were making all the materiality for the war, and they were giving us what in return here, we were demanding gold in return. And by the time the war came to a close, we had 2/3 of the gold. We had 70% of the gold in the world. Let me correct that. 70% of the known gold reserves in the world. And it was right here in the United States. In the Bretton Woods Conference, they decided that what they would do at the 1944 conference is that they had decided what they would do was to base their currency on the strongest currency at that point in the world, because we had the gold over here. And they would do so by having the gold backing up every $35 that were printed. So for every $35 that was out there operating in the world, it would be 1 ounce of gold that would back up every $35. That was a rate which they agreed upon at that conference. But you're putting this in the hands of politicians, don't forget. And so what the politicians decided to do after the agreement had been signed was that they're going to then do more printing than that. And they had printed over a period of time $12 million more and put it into the currency stream than they had the gold to back up that amount of money put into the stream, based upon the $35 an ounce. And it's really that which allowed them to pay for the Marshall Plan that reconstructed and rebuilt Europe. They're paying for it through currency. There was nothing other than hot air. I mean, we talk about the Marshall Plan rebuilt Europe. Yeah, they rebuilt Europe with paper, and they were caught at it by Charles de Gaulle that came into power in 1959. And Charles de Gaulle, the Chancellor of France, said, "Wait a minute, let's see if those dollars really mean what they say it means," because they were all flooding Europe with these dollars. These politicians in Washington. And de Gaulle decided, let me see if that's worth what they say. And he began to ask for the exchange of dollars for gold. And other nations decided to do the same thing. And between 1959 and 1971, there was a run on the gold in the United States, and it had been reduced by 50% by the time that had occurred. So for 12 years, from 59 to 1971, there's a run on the gold in the United States. And we had depleted the gold reserves in the United States by 50%. And Richard Nixon had no other choice in the matter. than to take the United States off of the agreed upon gold standard in 1944. I'll finish on this point right here by just saying simply that the United States, using this fake money, was able to finance the socialism that you now see in Europe, and also by the fact that its military was being used to, in fact, defend the rest of the world. It was able, the European countries and other countries were able to introduce socialism, which is the exportation of the progressive movement in this country to other parts of the world.
And that's the reason why Canada can have the health care they got, because their military is minuscule in comparison.
You see how it works now.
See, that's still how it works now. Let's face it, Japan or all these other countries paid for their own military, their defense, and to the level they have it now from us, their cost of living to go up. No, it'd be horrific for them. But we've carried that. We shoulder that burden since the end of World War II.
Yeah, I got to get out of here. You're right, John. You're exactly right about that. We exported our progressivism to other parts of the world is what I'm saying here. And that's why I say that the politicians here in this country, although not the most corrupt, I can think of two nations in particular that are above the corrupt level of the United States. And I've been in some of those countries that were very corrupt, and I've been in the most corrupt country in the world as well. I won't name them here on the air, but the most dangerous politicians are definitely the ones in Washington, D.C., dangerous to the people in this country, and also a danger to the world as well. And we are now fighting that battle right now, particularly in the election of 2016. Understand that, and we'll talk about that further at some point in time. Until next week, I want you to follow your dream, because if you don't follow your dream, you'll never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.